Hey guys, I'm Creepon Slayer, and I'm going to do a story. So this story's pretty cool. So if you could, please like and comment, subscribe, let's get into it. So, one day there was a boy, and his name is Devin. And he loved mushrooms. He would never step on them, he would never touch them, because he knew what was underneath the mushrooms. A magical world. And what was in this magical world, you might ask? Well, let's begin. So one day, he stepped out of his apartment to walk his dog. And his dog, her name, because it's a she, her name is Sweetie. So the two of them walked into the lovely grass field. And they walked, and there was loads of mushrooms. You could spot one from color to size to even height. They were everywhere in the grass field. So, one day, he saw some kids stepping on these mushrooms, and he heard the fairy tale that his mum told him when he was a boy, that there was fairies living in these mushrooms. Yes, I said fairies. Fairies live in the mushrooms. And so no more mushrooms could get stepped on. He decided to cover them up with leaves. And when he'd done this, he felt proud that he did the magical beings that could not be seen or heard a favor. So he walked about with his puppy, Sweetie, and had a really good time. The next day, he woke up that morning. He rushed, had his breakfast, and went to see if the leaves were still covering the mushrooms. And so they were. They were still covering the mushroom, and they were still there. But what he has noticed was a pretty girl with wings and looked very human-like, standing behind the tree that they always go to. So he went up to the girl and asked her, "Who are you? What's your name? How old are you?" So he's asking all these questions, and she smiles and simply replies, "My name is Belle." And it was spelled Belle. Belle. Like a flower bell. So she had really nice reddish orange hair, beautiful wings that extended out so far beyond imagine. Very tall, very slim, very pretty. So, sure enough, he hung out with her. The very next day it was school, and she knew him because he was asking her all these questions from the day previous. And to hide her wings, you might ask, she completely changed into her human form. She knew that his name is Devin, and he has a little girl puppy named Sweetie. And they hung out at school. They went to classes together, had classes together. They had lunch together. And he asked the big question, "Would you like to hang out with me after school? And she simply replied, yes. With you, your mum and dad, and your dog, I would be happy to. So, that afternoon, after school, they hung out with each other. They played video games, they played Minecraft together. They really enjoyed each other's company. They thought it was grand. But what she forgot all about was she had a curfew back in the fairy world. And so, she was being late. It was 6 p.m. And she said, Dev, I have to go. And he simply replies and goes, okay, I understand. Yeah, my mom told me about this. Fairies have a curfew if they appear in the human world, right? And she simply replies with, yes, we do. So she went back home, and knowing that her mum was not very pleased for her to miss curfew, she was very aggravated with the fact that she was in the human world for too long. But she wanted Belle to be in the human world to get a human education. So instead of learning about what fairies learn about, she wanted her to learn about human things and get a deeper perspective of what humans are mainly like. What Belle knew is that there is a good human, and his name is Devon. And he has a mum and a dad and a puppy, and a lizard named Tinyfoot, and a bird named Maze. That's all she knew. She didn't know anybody else. She was afraid to talk to the boys at school. She was also even a little bit afraid of talking to the girls at school as well. So, the next day, she went to Devon and said, I'm back. He went, awesome. Can we hang out? She said, I wish I could, Devon, but unfortunately I cannot. He was like, what do you mean? He replied, and she looked at him with such sadness. My mum got angry at me because I missed curfew, and if it happens again, I can't see you ever again. And he replies with, you have to do what you have to do. How about you turn me into a fairy, and I hang out with you, because I don't have a curfew. And she replies and goes, oh yes, you would love the fairy world, Dev, you would love the fairy world. And he simply replies, goes, oh yes, I would. I would like to see what it would be like to have wings, and to be your size, the size of a mushroom. So they go near the tree where they first met, and she said, now I'm telling you, Dev, once I sprinkle this fairy dust onto your face, you have to close your eyes because the side effects are very brutal if you have your eyes open. They literally make your eyes burn, they itch, and if you don't have your eyes closed, you will have a mark on your arm that can't be removed. So you have to promise me that you close your eyes when I throw the fairy dust. And he looked at her and said, of course. I don't want a permanent mark that I can never ditch. So she opens the palm of her hand. She has the fairy dust. She looks at him deep into his eyes and says, are you ready? He replies, yes, I'm ready. Anything for you. So she smiles real big He closes his eyes, and she throws the fairy dust into his face, and sure enough, small as a mushroom, he's a fairy. And then she throws the fairy dust into her face, and she shrinks down to mushroom size. Then the two of them go into the mushroom. There's a door in the mushroom, and they literally go into there. There's an elevator in the mushroom, and they go down into the ground. Because the fairy world is in the ground. So all the fairies are safe. So they go down underground, and he sees this big, fast revolving world down underground. And he has amazement on his face. And he's really surprised. And he's like, wow, I've read books and I've heard fairy tales of you guys, but seeing the real thing in person is totally extraordinary. He felt a feeling that day. He felt more alive in himself, knowing that there's a big world underneath the ground, called the fairy world. It's invisible to those that don't believe, but those that do believe can see it. And he was a strong believer, so he saw it. The people that work with the pipelines can't see it because they don't believe in the little creatures. It's like a city down there. It was very awesome. No, there was no skyscrapers or big buildings. But it was very viney and very earth-like. There was even more mushrooms underneath the ground than there is at the top of the ground. It was a big world. So they hung out. And he met her mum. And at first, she was skeptical of him. But then after a while, she liked him. Thought he was a great guy. Even wanted him over more. Because she likes him so much. So they hung out for a while. And it was around the same time, 6 p.m. And she said, I don't want your parents to be mad at me for not letting you come home. I said, I'll stay for one more hour, and then I'll head home. So around 7 p.m., they hung out together, and then they said their goodbyes, and she said, let's take you home. So they went into the mushroom elevator, came up, stood outside the mushroom, and through the dust again, closed his eyes, and he appeared back to human size. So he hugged her, and she hugged him back, and said, thanks for the wonderful day, he said. And she said, time with you just isn't enough. I want more time with you. And he replies, I'll make sure of that. So he smiles, gives her a kiss on the cheek, and walks home. The end.